Shabbat Shalom. I wonder, how will we remember this time? This summer, this year, this chapter in our collective story? How will we reflect on it years from now? What will we say about what is happening in this country, in Israel, and around the world? What will we say about the shifting tides of public opinion? And about what is tolerated, what is celebrated, and what is ignored? How will we speak about who holds power, how they use it, and whether they use it well? And what will we say about ourselves? How will we describe the choices we make, the words we speak, or things we leave unsaid, and the moments when we are silent, unsure, and overwhelmed? This week, we begin the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. Deutero, from the Greek word meaning second. It's a second telling, a book of remembering. Moses stands before the people and revisits the stories that they lived through. He is at the end of his life, reflecting on the past in order to make sense of all that has happened. Moses retells their story, but it is reshaped in the retelling from the perspective of looking back years later. In Deuteronomy, Moses tells a different version of the stories of the spies going into the promised land to see if it is hospitable. Back in the book of Numbers, we read that God instructs Moses to send men to scout the land of Canaan. But here in Deuteronomy, Moses tells it differently and says to the people, "You, Israelites, all approached me and said, 'Let us send men ahead to scout the land.'" So in the earlier version, the mission comes from God, but in Moses' retelling, it comes from the people, indicating that the blame falls on them for all that unfolds. And further, back in the first iteration of the story, God tells Moses that Moses will not be able to enter the promised land. Why? Because he struck the rock in anger to bring water from it instead of speaking to it as he had been commanded. But here in Deuteronomy, the story of the rock is omitted. It's omitted altogether. Instead, Moses places blame on the spies who reported that the promised land was filled with impediments to their entrance, indicating their lack of faith. He said, "Because of you, God was angry with me and will not allow me to enter the promised land." Moses shifts the weight of responsibility for his punishment onto the Israelites. He reshapes the story, not as one of personal failure, but as a consequence of communal failure. Stories are being reshaped all the time as we speak about them. How do we hold different narratives, seemingly conflicting narratives, together? What consequences arise from what we say? How do we characterize what happened? Who bears blame? Who holds responsibility for repair? And how do we move forward? Like Moses, we begin by looking back, retelling our stories. Sometimes that means looking back and realizing our failures. Upon reflection, we might say, "I thought I was being honest, but actually, I had a failure of compassion." Or, "I thought I was just setting boundaries, but actually, I was really withdrawing out of fear and failing to stay present." "I thought I was being realistic, but I was really avoiding vulnerability a failure of trust. I thought I was protecting someone by not telling the truth, but actually, I was just protecting myself from discomfort, a failure of integrity. These are not just admissions. They are openings, opportunities to take back our part in the story with responsibility and ultimately hope. Moses retells his story in a way that indicates his intent that people will learn from it, not to stay in the past, but to move forward with responsibility and with understanding. The stories we tell shape our understanding of reality. They lead to action. How will we tell the story of this time? How is the telling of it and the reshaping of it unfolding right now, right before our very eyes? This week, news reports circulated about a worsening hunger crisis in Gaza. A particular heart-wrenching image of a frail, emaciated child stirred up fury that was aimed at Israel. And yet, it was later revealed that this suffering child had a pre-existing health disorder that led to his malnourishment. This sort of story of half-truths and misleading information has shaped the public's perception of the crisis. Such narratives serve Hamas's propaganda war. The story is complex. There is a hunger crisis in Gaza. The extent of it and who is to blame is murky. We must ask, what's behind the spread of misinformation? What is truth in the fog of war? War forces us into terrible positions that have no clear path of resolution. We are anchored by our Jewish values. That has never changed. We are grounded by the value of feeding the hungry and the belief that each and every life is precious. But we cannot put our own lives in danger while exercising these values. That is not an easy lesson. So how will this story unfold? Hamas threatens and terrorizes both Israeli and Palestinian lives, and it must be dislodged. Aid is flowing again, and we must help ensure it continues and reaches those who need it most without obstruction from Hamas. We must do what we can to ensure access to food and aid for civilians as our moral obligation, and to encourage others to do the same, to respond to the suffering of innocents. This Shabbat is a special one. It's called Shabbat Chazon, or in English, the Shabbat of prophetic vision. On this Shabbat, we consider our past and present actions. Tomorrow night, we begin the observance of Tisha B'Av, the lowest point in the Jewish calendar, when we mark a day of communal mourning for all tragedies and catastrophes that have befallen our people. It is also a fast day. And as we fast, we think not only of ancient grief, but of the hunger that plagues our world today. In this time of war, our mourning includes grief for those suffering beyond our borders, for those who are hungry, afraid, and caught in cycles of violence. On this Tisha B'Av, we also grieve for the hostages still in captivity, for all our Israeli brothers and sisters fighting against hate from many sides, and for all our community combating the terrible press of anti-Semitism. As we enter this season of reflection, we carry both ancient grief and current pain. We remember destruction that has befallen us, but also our undying determination to build a better future. May we have the courage to speak truth even when it breaks our hearts. May we have the wisdom to hold complexity even when we long for simplicity. May we remember that our stories, when told with honesty and compassion, can be a path not only to understanding, but towards change, and with God's help, towards healing. Shabbat Shalom.